Welcome to Volleyball State, your look at volleyball in 6 rotations. Here are your hosts, Jeff Sheldon and Lincoln Arneal.
Hello and welcome to Volleyball State, a look at the sport of volleyball in 6 rotations and a proud part of the Hurrdat Sports family. I'm Jeff Sheldon.
And I'm Lincoln Arneal.
This week on the show, Nebraska keeps rolling. Now 21 straight wins for the Huskers after Nebraska swept both of the Big Ten's Pacific Northwest newcomers. We're going to recap the Huskers' wins over Oregon and Washington, which kept us up late on Thursday and Saturday nights. Plus, Wisconsin sends notice to the rest of the league that the Badgers still have plenty of bite. Pitt rolls to 2 more wins, and Arizona State now wins the meeting of the Big 12's top 2 teams, and the Sun Devils are now in control of the Big 12 title race. And we talk with Kayla Banwarth, former Husker star libero, Team USA libero, and now the head coach of the Pro Volleyball Federation's Atlanta Vibe. We talk about a lot of things with Kayla, including why does it seem like everyone has a good libero now? But first, Lincoln, tell the folks all the things they need to know about interacting with us outside of this show.
Yes, you can follow us on Twitter at VolleyballPod, on Twitter there. You can follow us on TikTok. I write about the day-to-day action of the Nebraska team on Huskers Illustrated. I also put out a weekly Substack, volleyballstate.substack.com. I also put on recap videos after every Nebraska match with my thoughts on YouTube. So I put out a lot of content for the people. Jeff puts on a lot of content for the people. Eat it up.
Less than what you do, though. I thought the Substack this week was really interesting, and it'll come out usually either Friday morning or Saturday morning. The Western Kentucky stuff this week I thought was hilarious.
I had that bookmark. I forgot about it, but I had a bookmark and went back to it. That their coaches, they had 2 coaches get hurt in the same recreational volleyball league. One messed up their calf, and the one blew out their Achilles or knee.
I mean, we hope Travis Hudson and his staff heal. I mean, the other part of it, they haven't lost a conference match at home in the regular season in like 6 years, something like that. It's a lot.
Conference USA, and the weird part about it is probably a very evolving Conference USA roster of teams as well too. That changes a lot. So I generally put that out whenever Nebraska doesn't play the night before. So if Nebraska plays on Thursday night, I put it out Saturday morning. If they play on Friday night, I put it on Friday morning. So it's whenever I have a night free to write that.
Well, what do we got coming up on the show today?
Oh, we got lots of good Nebraska goodness. Nebraska's continue rolling on. They make the Pacific Northwest. So they started out with talk about rotation 1 with Nebraska's matchup with Oregon. Then rotation 2, copy and paste, record crowd, Pacific Northwest, Nebraska sweeps Washington. Then we'll take a look around the Big Ten in rotation 3. Big matches there, as Jeff already alluded to. Rotation 4, we talk with Kayla Banwarth about her relationship with Lexi Rodriguez and professional volleyball. Then we will take a look at the results around the rotation in rotation 5. And then we will wrap up looking ahead to Minnesota and Indiana. Nebraska gets to play a home match again. Rotation 6, we'll talk about the Hoosiers and the Gophers.
And it will be most likely the first time in several weeks Nebraska will have not participated in a match where an arena attendance record has been broken. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, maybe down near the end of our Washington recap, just all of the records Nebraska has been involved in both this year and over the last couple years. It really, I think, paints a picture of a program that sits in a unique place in the national landscape.
We can finally pay our respects to Caitlin Clark and thank her for everything, which all blessings flow.
Yeah. I do want to talk about that, the Caitlin Clark effect, because that was not the first time I heard somebody say that watching the match on Saturday.
We'll save that conversation. Put a thumbtack in it. We'll get back to that. Let's start rotation 1, though. Nebraska goes out to Oregon. First time in the regular season they've played up there in a while. They extend their match to 20, and they were pushed a little bit in the second set, but they win a sweep straight sets, 25-12, 26-24, 25-18, school record 8,566, Matthew Knight Arena. No ugly court to stare at. It was a wonderful game to watch. So it was Nebraska took care of business and against the number 12 ranked Oregon Ducks.
I'm kicking myself now for not remembering this exactly. Nebraska played up in Eugene a few years ago at the Vert Challenge. I want to say it was 2016. Is either 2016 or 2017, but I don't think they played Oregon. They played Florida and then they might have played Texas.
Ooh.
But it was that 4-team tournament where it was Oregon, Texas, Florida, Nebraska, but you didn't play each of the 3 other teams. You only played 2 of the other teams, and the home team got to decide the matchups. So I think Oregon was like, we don't want to play Nebraska. We'll play everyone else. And Nebraska played Florida and Texas. And I want to say that was like Jazz Sweet's college debut, that year's class. Where
2016.
Yep. And that would be the year that Nebraska beat Texas pretty handily early in the season. And then Texas returned the favor in the Final Four.
It was number 1 versus number 2 first weekend of the year. Yeah. And then Florida was number 10. So
yeah,
good off the dome.
Well, there's a lot of it there. Sticking with 2024, Nebraska out-hits Oregon on Thursday night, 278-133. That was Oregon's second lowest hitting percentage of the year. The only match the Ducks hit worse in was when they got swept by Penn State back on October 4th, where they hit 075. And this was, this has been a recurring theme and for Nebraska's play over the last month is that defense is really stepping up and holding people to some of the lowest hitting percentages of the season. Nebraska didn't have a great night offensively, but anytime you're over 250 in a conference match, I'd say that's pretty good. Both of Nebraska's outside hitters had good nights. This was the theme of the weekend. Is Nebraska's left sides really carried them. Harper Murray had 14 kills against Oregon, hit 414. It was a double-double. She added 10 digs. Taylor Landfair, we have been wondering. Taylor Landfair has been hot and cold over the last month. I think she started now Nebraska's last 8 or 9 matches. She was big on Thursday night. She had 13 kills and hit 407. She added a couple blocks, which is a really nice thing to see from her at the net as well. Between the two of them, Harper Murray and Taylor Landfair Lincoln, they only had 4 hitting errors. And sometimes that's where, they can jump up and bite you, is if they get too error prone. And that's been the nice thing about Landfair lately, is even if she's not putting balls away, she's not hitting them out of bounds with great frequency. So, Nebraska's outside hitters led the way, and they get a big road sweep of Oregon.
Yeah. And I think the key there, you see from the outside hitters both, I think you saw the Northwestern match in both matches this week, they learned what shots they need to hit. Taylor Landfair really has been swinging a lot more aggressive and only tipping when she has to. That results in a lot more kills. And Harper Murray is really, I've been really impressed with her arsenal that she's unloaded, whether it's going cross court, the sharp cut. She's really kind of the one shot that I think she's at is the tip where she's takes part in the triple block, or she's blocking the middle of the net, and she doesn't get all the way out to the pin, but she still can tip it right towards that the sideline there and get it to fall. So she's been really, really creative with her shots that she's been making as well too, and they needed it. Yeah.
I noticed that against Washington too. She's taking some big out of system risks, and when you're an outside hitter, you're gonna be asked to take out the trash a lot. And it was like Oregon and Washington did not know how to defend her, because she was hitting shots and ripping shots, like high confidence fastball shots out of system that, is kind of the last level to reach when you're an outside hitter, and was just putting balls away, at a really impressive fashion. So this was, I won't call it a breakout weekend for Harper Murray, because she's had plenty of good weekends before, but this was potentially her best weekend of the season, I thought. And Nebraska really needed it, because everyone else was just a little bit high error. This was sort of a weekend to forget for Merritt Beeson. On Thursday, Beeson had 6 kills and 4 errors, did not hit very well against Oregon. Nebraska's middles were high error as well. Rebecca Alec and Andy Jackson combined against Oregon for 8 kills and 6 errors on 22 swings. And you're a little surprised to see that, because Oregon focused a lot of their attention on Nebraska's pins. They were putting up a triple block a lot of the time. And so there was a lot of open floor. But, we talked about at times in the past, Taylor Landfair has been a little high error. She loves to try to hit deep corner or deep line. And when you miss that, you're going to sail shots long. Andy Jackson and Rebecca Alec both against Oregon were hitting shots long, hitting shots wide. I think credit Oregon's block. Oregon is one of the best blocking teams in the Big Ten, and they got Andy Jackson a couple of times. But Nebraska was not made to pay for that, just because their outside hitters were so good, and Nebraska's defense and block were so good as well against Oregon.
Yeah, I don't know if it just it's running into the middle of the season too, and people have enough tape on this Nebraska team this year that they're able to scout them a little bit more, know that Jackson and Alex, what their favorite shots are when they are getting attacks. But you wonder, because they struggled both matches this weekend a little bit. I mean, more so in this match, I think, than against Washington. So I wonder if it's other teams are getting a scouting report on them and know how to defend them, or they're just getting a little bit fewer opportunities, so they feel like they have to hit it harder. And if the set's not perfect, those type of shots can sail on you and sail past the end line.
Well, one thing I noticed from both the matches, Oregon and Washington this week, Bergen Riley is getting pretty ambitious on when she's going to set the middle.
Yeah.
Like, she's going to set them in transition, even if it's not a perfect pass. She was throwing sets to the middle, even if she was back by the 10-foot line. And if your middle blocker has a big kill radius and they've got good range, I think you can do that. I would not describe Rebecca Alec as having a big kill radius, even though it was a pretty impressive swing she put away on match point against Washington on Saturday night. But if you set her, a little bit too high, a little bit too low, if it's not a perfect set, she still tries to hit it pretty hard. She doesn't, take a little off and try to keep it in. And that's where a lot of those swings started going long. Andy Jackson needs to keep the ball in as well. When you can get up as high as her, you think you'd be okay getting on top of the ball. She didn't get on top of every ball. She's hitting them long, and there's plenty of open court back there too. You're just sort of bailing out the opposing team when you're not doing that. But we're nitpicking, a road sweep that Nebraska had against a top 15 program. And Nebraska defensively did a really nice job against Oregon's big gun, Mimi Collier, who I feel like we talked up a lot on last week's show when we were previewing the Oregon matchup. She had 13 kills for Oregon, but it was on 52 swings. She only hit 115. Oregon sent all of their balls to Mimi Collier, back row, front row, whatever. Nebraska's leader in attacks in that match was 29. So, a little over half of what Mimi Collier had with Harper Murray. That just, again, goes to show you that Bergen Riley's running a really balanced offense. Nebraska passed really well against Oregon, and Nebraska was able to bottle up most of Oregon's big hitters for most of the match.
Yeah, you look at Harper Murray had 29, Kayla Landfair 27, Merritt Beeson 24. I mean, a little pin heavy, but that's the balance that Nebraska craves. They will never have someone get 52 unless it's a 5-setter. And the next highest for Oregon was 19. So I think John Cook said after the match, you knew where the ball was going, but it was a matter of stopping them. So she's very creative, very athletic, did a great job. So Nebraska did a good job knowing the game plan, and they see some attackers like her. I mean, she's a Raina Terry type, she's a Jess Mruzik type. The teams that really are one hitter dependent. So,
but I thought, it shows you how well Nebraska is disciplined when they play defense, because Mimi Collier was kind of high error in this match. Nebraska's block set up against her, and then you stick Lexi Rodriguez in the cross court. And it left Mimi Collier trying to hit the perfect shot to try to score. And she was long and she was wide, especially early on in the early going when Nebraska jumped out to big leads in games 1 and 2. So I think Nebraska frustrated Mimi Collier quite a bit. And, this was not the lineup I think that Oregon is used to playing. Both opponents this weekend were playing a system that was a little different than what they were used to because of some injuries. And we'll dive into that when we talk about Washington too. But Oregon normally runs a 5-1. Well, I guess they had a DS that was injured, and normally you don't see a team switching their whole system because a DS is injured. I think their starting setter, it was also not 100% healthy, so maybe they didn't want to play her 6 rotations all night. But Oregon switched to a 6-2. Nebraska did not even know this, according to the TV broadcast, when they rolled out the lineup. And so Nebraska's scout was kind of out the window, but it didn't matter. Nebraska ran out, I think, to a 4-0 lead in game 1. Olivia Malk was serving really well. And this was kind of the story of the match, is Nebraska served really, really tough against Oregon and just kind of had the Ducks on their heels all night.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stats. I think Nate Poland for the Sports Information rolled that out too. Nebraska did not have any service errors, and it was the first time since 2017 or 2018. It was a weird match too. They lost in the match they lost to Northern Iowa. They didn't have any service errors. So the first time in 6-7 years where they didn't have any service errors. So they finished with 4 aces, 0 errors. And I don't know if that's just Nebraska's mentality. I feel like they changed their service approach. They want to serve tough, but they don't want to serve reckless.
Right.
And that's really kind of a turning point in their season of get the ball in, let the offense do it, let the defense do its job. And you really saw that with Oregon. Yeah, you mentioned Kristen Klein was their starting setter. She's a redshirt freshman. And then they went to Roberta
Purashot.
Yeah, she was a JUCO, the JUCO National Player of the Year, led a junior college in Florida Northwestern State or something like that to a national title last year. So she comes in with some nice credentials, but I don't know if it made a huge difference of which setter was in that Oregon's offense operated on levels too, but they both finished with about 15 and 18 assists. So
one thing I noticed that, I think you could tell Purashai is not used to playing very much. When you're playing in the 6-2, they stick the setter in right back defense. And I don't think she had a great night defensively. When you have a new setter in there, setters aren't really known for their defense most of the time anyway. But if you play in a 5-1, at least you're used to it. Purashai coming off the bench, Nebraska got some soft kills against her. I think there were some balls that Taylor Landfair got down that maybe a more experienced setter is able to keep up off the floor. And, credit Nebraska, they saw a weakness there. They just, when in doubt, hit the ball with the new kid playing back row and see if you can get balls to go down. And Nebraska got a few kills against Oregon in that matchup. I want to highlight Olivia Mauk again, the freshman from Bennington. She served really tough. And this is kind of a role that she has earned for herself for this team this year is they start sets with her serving now. And so Mauk started the match serving, got Nebraska out to a 4-0 lead in game 1. When game 3 was tied 11-11, Mauk was at the service line for when Nebraska ran 6 straight points to blow that set open. She had 2 aces. And then in the back row, she handled 12 serves when Oregon sent the ball her way. Another really strong match for Olivia Mauk. And I hope people understand that this was talked about. Courtney Thompson, who was doing the color broadcasting for the broadcast in the Washington match on Saturday night, brought this up. And I really want to drill it home. So I hope people appreciate this, how kind of a unique luxury that Nebraska has a back row that they can roll out with Lexi Rodriguez at libero, Lainey Choboy, and Olivia Mauk playing defensive specialist. That is an embarrassment of riches in the back row. And none of those players are getting kills, but they are doing all of the things that might not show up in the box score. They're returning serves, they're digging balls. A free ball comes over and it's going to be a perfect pass to get Nebraska in transition. Those 3 players had a great weekend.
Yeah, and those 3 plus Harper Murray were the reason why Nebraska is giving up the fewest number of aces in the whole country. And I don't think it's even that close. So they're doing a great job. Great job of setting that tone and really frustrating teams. I mean, teams come in averaging an ace or 2 per set, and they're not getting any. I mean, I think Oregon got 3 against Nebraska.
They got 2 in game 1, and that's where you're like, oh, this. And they were both against Harper Murray, I believe.
Yeah, she shanked them both. Yeah,
and so you're like, oh, is this going to be a rough match for Murray? Murray was so good against Oregon. She's become kind of the target in the serve receive game because she's in 6 rotations, and teams know now, okay, we can't serve the libero, we can't serve this little redheaded kid that they bring in who's a freshman. She's apparently a really good passer, so who are we going to serve now? Washington actually started serving them short to just try to gum up the route running by the in hitters. And that wasn't all that effective. I do want to highlight Harper Murray here. She was served 18 times. She passed a team high in serves. She did give up a couple of aces, but then she comes back with, what we say, it was 14 kills, and hit better than 400. That was a really composed match from Harper Murray. She had 10 digs as well. All of that in a 3-set match are really good numbers. And, I think she was definitely the player of the match on Thursday against Oregon.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned those 2 aces. I mean, after the second one made it 6-6 in the first set. So both were very early on. She settled in and really did a nice job with that. And also, let's highlight Taylor Landfair. I mean, her 4th match of the year with at least 9 kills and hitting than 400. So she's I think what we saw this week, I mean, the Northwestern match was not a great one until you ran out of gas, but the Wisconsin match last week and then the two this week against Washington and Oregon, she's really kind of establishing herself as that second outside hitter. And we haven't seen Lindsay Krause in a little while, so she's still putting it together in practice and really kind of, I think, delivering more of what Nebraska expected from her when they added her to the roster too, of kind of just being someone they can count on, rely on to string together kills when she's in the front row.
Also, Nebraska decided like they had an ideal serving target as well. Oregon's outside hitter, Michelle Owabete, they served her 48 times. Like, I don't know if the last time a Nebraska player had to field 48 serves in a match. And this was in 3 sets. So what's that, 16 serves a set? Like, basically all of the serves that Nebraska would have sent over went to Michelle Owabete. Nebraska served 70 times. And they served Owabete 48 times. And quite honestly, I thought she held up pretty well. You know, she wasn't shanking balls all over the place, but she was the target to I guess, try to wear down and get Oregon out of system. Nebraska served pretty tough. They had, out ace Oregon, something like, was it 4-0? Was it 5-0? I don't have the numbers right in front of me because my screen has condensed. But
4 aces for Nebraska, 6 or 3 for Oregon, and Oregon had 6 errors.
Exactly. So a really good night for Nebraska. You know, tactically, even if the sort of game plan had to change a little bit from when they came in with Oregon having to switch to the 6-2. And when you do that, you know, you always have 3 attackers in the front row, but you have to pass really good because your setter is always in the back row and can't go up and joust. For 3, you know, your setter's always in the back row, so they can't go up and joust. And you saw that several times where Oregon had overpasses and their setter was basically just left to cower and put their hand over their head while Nebraska could go up and uncontestedly jam balls down on them. So, you know, a really impressive win. I think we want to talk a little bit about game 2 because that was the only set that was really close. Nebraska led 17-14 in game 2, but Oregon came back with a 4-1 run. So we're tied at 18. They blocked Beeson again. You know, Lincoln, I found myself after the match trying to find that what they used to do in the final book was put up a box score per set. And I don't think they do that now, or at least they don't do it online.
I don't think they put it online. Yeah, whenever it's a home match, we get a full book, and that's nice to have. But
so I couldn't find Beeson's numbers specifically for game 2, but it was kind of a worst case scenario for her. I think she got stuffed 3 times in game 2, maybe only had 1 kill. And so, you know, that's where the bulk of her rough night came. But, you know, we're going to jump ahead. 22-22, Beeson had hit long, trying to find high hands, but Taylor Landfair comes back and puts Nebraska up 23-22. She tools for a kill. And this is kind of the point of the match, Lincoln. We're tied at 23, and Oregon looked like they were going to have a set point because Naomi Glover, officials originally ruled that the Oregon outside hitter caught hands on her swing that went long. They called it on Harper Murray. Nebraska immediately is doing the shaking hands thing, like jazz hands, like I didn't touch the ball. John Cook challenges, and I think Nebraska was undefeated on challenges this weekend. Officials ruled that it was not a touch, overturned the call. Nebraska went up 24-23, and then a couple of side outs later, Nebraska was up 25-24, and Harper Murray puts away an out-of-system kill to win the set 26-24, and that was kind of the end of the Oregon threat.
Yeah, I was just checking my notes on the challenges. John Cook was 4 for 4. I think he was 3 for 3. He reversed. They called Olivia Mauk serve out. That they reversed that, and then Andy Jackson, they called her hit out. She got called for a touch, and then he was 1 for 1. The second point of the match in Washington, that they reversed that. So that was a key one too, because one of the teams is gonna have set point regardless after that point. If you tied at 23, and it really kind of gave Nebraska a little bit of breathing room, and Glover came back with a kill after a side out, but it really kind of sucked the wind out of Oregon sails. They never had a set point that entire their big comeback there late.
And this was an Oregon team that 2 nights earlier had gone out to Minnesota, and was it a sweep? Did they sweep Minnesota? Or it was either a sweep or 3-1, but they had a really impressive win up in Minneapolis. And,
it was
really kind of put everyone on notice that, like, hey, the Ducks are game day players too. And Nebraska comes back and just puts it on them up in Eugene on Thursday night.
Yeah, it was a sweep. So there you go. Yeah, it was 14, 20, 21. We'll talk about that later in the Big Ten roundup.
And actually, I apologize. That was on Saturday because Washington was the team that went out to Minnesota on Thursday and also beat the Ducks, or excuse me, beat the Gophers. So the Gophers, rough weekend for them. They lost both matches at home to the Pacific Northwest teams. But anything else you want to add about Nebraska, Oregon on Thursday?
No, let's move on to Saturday. Stay in the Pacific Northwest. Nebraska went up to Seattle, and they got another sweep. They won that one 25-17, 25-11, 25-21. Again, another school record crowd, 9,768. First time they had ever sold out Alaska Airlines Arena for volleyball. So a really great crowd, great environment. I think there was a lot more red in Oregon than there was in Seattle, but there was still a strong contingency of Nebraska fans.
It really came through on the broadcast, I thought, on Saturday night. That Washington crowd was really into it.
Yeah.
Even though Washington was, not as competitive as you thought they might be in that match, I think Nebraska led like 24-17, something like that in game 3, and Washington still went on a 4-0 run to fight off 4 match point. And that crowd was into it. Like, nobody was leaving early. They stuck around. So kudos to the Washington crowd. And I think I read somebody on social media said, it looked like the Washington crowd maybe wanted that match a little bit more than the Washington team. Washington also, was dealing with, this was not their ideal lineup either. No. Kirsten Barton, their junior outside hitter, who was their leading attacker, actually got hurt in their last match of October. So the weekend before, when they beat Oregon, she left in the 5th set with an injury. So they were without their top outside hitter. And then Maddie Ensley, who was their second leading attacker, apparently got hurt in practice on Friday and also missed the match. And so Washington had to hurry up and scramble a lineup together. They moved their opposite hitter, Imani Bush, over to the left side. They scrapped their 6-2 that they normally go with to a 5-1. And I thought their setter was all right. Didn't play bad. But this was sort of another makeshift lineup that Washington ran out there against Nebraska. And Nebraska passed really, really well on Saturday against Washington. I thought, listen, Washington is one of the best serving teams in the conference. They had 13 aces on Thursday night against Minnesota. They had not zero. They had one ace that I believe came late in game 3.
When they were facing match point, they finally got their first ace.
And they aced Lexi Rodriguez of anyone. But Nebraska didn't get stuck in any bad rotations. They were hitting above 4, like well over 400 for most of the match. And then they come down a little bit in game 3. Nebraska hits 375 on the road in front of 10,000 people late at night, playing 2 hours away from their normal time zone, and just puts it on Washington and sweeps them. Another big Harper Murray match, 12 kills. She hit 360. Taylor Landfair hit 471 in this match and had 10 kills. And then, I never want to undersell what Bergen Riley can do. I thought, because of the passing largely, this was a great Bergen Riley match. She had 34 assists. She served tough. And then kind of the last sort of final form of Bergen Riley that we've been waiting to see is for her to assert herself offensively at the net. She had 5 kills on 6 swings. I mean, even if you have 2 kills on 6 swings, the fact that you're sending the ball over 6 times just kind of keeps the other team off balance and doesn't let the opposing middles camp out on your pins. That was a great match from Bergen Riley, I thought. And again, Nebraska is dominant. They outblocked Washington 7-1. Washington's a pretty good blocking team every year, and they never let that crowd get into the match until it was too late.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the crowd, like you mentioned before, the crowd came and fired up too. And I think Washington rode that wave of momentum early on. Washington led the first set 10-7, had scored 3 points in a row. But I think at that point is when Nebraska really settled in and said, okay, we know what to do in this type of environment. And that's when they settled. They went on a 4-0 run right after that, and eventually went up 15-12. So was it an 8-2 run by Nebraska? And that really kind of, once Nebraska got used to the atmosphere, used to playing in that gym, they settled in and they really took control, and they dominated the rest of that set. The second set was not close at all. And the thing impressive, you mentioned how good Harper Murray was. She terminated on her first 7 swings of the match. I mean, I don't think she was dug until was a dozen points into the
Game
second
2.
set. Yeah. Yeah. So just impressive performance by her. Again, we've seen that repertoire of the shots that she can do. And she would have been over 500 or hitting over 400. She had an error late and in the third set, kind of when Washington was making their last gasp for hope, but otherwise she would have been above 400 as well too. That one late error hurt her numbers, but didn't hurt her overall performance.
Some of those out of system swings that she ended up taking to, I thought were so impressive. She ripped one down the line, which was like, okay, how exactly are you going to stop that? We've talked for the last several weeks about the range she's showing on her tips and her roll shots just over the block. Taylor Landfair, when she tips, can still look like she's sort of starting a transition drill in practice. Murray is doing it with a lot of deftness and getting the ball just over the block and putting it in the donut where there's nobody at. So, Harper Murray's court vision is really taking a step forward. Do want to make mention of the middles. They had a tough night against Oregon. They bounced back against Washington on Saturday. Andy Jackson had 7 kills and 3 blocks, hit 333. And then Rebecca Alec, 5 kills on 10 swings with 3 blocks as well. So, your middles don't have to take over a match. They just have to be, pluses, not minuses. Yeah. And both Nebraska's middles, I thought, were pretty solid on Saturday.
Yeah, that was one of the better attacking performances from Alec that we had seen. And the weird part was that she didn't have any kills in the first set. And then she has 2 kills on the first 2 rallies of the second set and then added a third one shortly thereafter. So I don't know. They must have been talking about that between the first and second set is feed the middles. The middles got to eat. So she came on. That was one of her better attacking. She's been kind of a little quiet and overshadowed by Andy Jackson a little bit too. But for 5 kills on 10 swings is a good performance. That's what you want out of Rebecca Alec.
Again, it was a rough night for Merritt Beeson. I think a little bit lower error, but had 4 kills, 2 errors for Beeson. On the weekend, Beeson just 11 kills, 6 errors on 42 swings, hitting 119. So, she had been up there after some early season struggles, come back down to earth this weekend. It's just, kind of missing piece. Can Nebraska get all of their pin hitters firing on all cylinders at once, kind of like Wisconsin had on Saturday against Penn State? But, Nebraska goes on the road, has played their last 4 matches on the road, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Oregon, Washington, hasn't dropped a set.
Yeah.
Has won 12 consecutive sets on the road, and I think 15 consecutive overall. They swept 5 straight matches in by far the toughest volleyball conference in the country. Not a bad start to November for Nebraska.
No. I think to make it through those 2 weeks, that was the gauntlet that Nebraska needed to get to. And John Cook talked about this in Washington, that when you're playing that much, they went Friday, Sunday, Thursday, Saturday. That's 4 matches in a span of 8 days. You're not getting a lot of practice time, or when you are practicing, you're not doing as intensely as you may when you have a few days strung together where you can really get in the gym. And I think that's what you saw a little bit with that Beeson connection, and a little bit of the middles of the timing is off, where they just need to go back into the shop and fine tune everything so they could operate at a high level.
Yeah, I'd like to see Beeson, try to tool a little bit more than she did this weekend. There were a lot of good block touches on her. She got dug a lot. She was hitting. She got blocked several times against Oregon. It's like, if the outside hand is there, if the high flat shot is there, let's try that instead of, cross everything or just hitting into the block. How good has Nebraska's defense been over the last couple of weeks? I threw this together last night. We talked about Purdue hitting over 300. Purdue hit 311 when Nebraska beat them in 5 on October 11th. But since then, Nebraska has held its last 9 opponents to a combined 135 hitting. So whatever, Purdue had 2 of the best pin hitters in the country. Maybe it's as simple as that. But Nebraska has really tightened the screws on serve, block, and defense. I think only one of those teams and that has hit over 200 in that stretch, and that was Illinois, who Nebraska beat, and is a pretty good Illinois team. So Nebraska's defense has been outstanding ever since Purdue kind of put a big number on them a month ago.
Yeah. Exactly. Speaking of big numbers, let's talk about the big numbers and attendance that Nebraska has been putting up. we got an assist. I was planning to do this and write about this for the Substack this week, but Dave Fight put it together, did some research. So props to him. I believe his Twitter handle is Fight Can Write. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, it's Dave Fight. Gretna, Nebraska's favorite son, Dave Fight.
Yes, he has a very handle. That's how you know I pronounce it, because his Twitter handle is Fight Can Write. But he put together a list. I kind of went in and added a few of my own, but he did a lot of the lifting of this. But Nebraska has 21. We counted 21 different arenas where they have been part of the largest crowd to play there. And we've seen in the last weekend, the last 3 matches in Northwestern, at Oregon, at Washington. They've all done that too, but it's kind of a fun list to look through, just to see wherever Nebraska goes, there's a lot of big crowds. And we'll preface by saying this, that they're not the only school in doing this. I mean, Texas has a number of records. As I was looking up some old Big 12 schools that Nebraska may have, Texas has a couple. I know Wisconsin has some big road crowds as well too. So it's not a unique thing to Nebraska, but 21 is a lot of different venues that Nebraska's played in to have the arena record for.
And they're gonna go play Maryland this year, not in the tiny little like annex Xfinity Center pavilion. They're gonna go down the hall to the big building where you can put 15,000 in for basketball, and they'll draw 5,000 or 6,000 there and set the attendance record at Maryland in a couple weeks as well. But I think part of it is the sport is we're riding a wave in the sport where just crowds are bigger, more matches are on TV. Volleyball is just becoming more of a thing. But Nebraska has a little bit of a part to play in propelling that wave as well. But I know we talked about, we heard the words Caitlin Clark effect, where Courtney Thompson mentioned that on Saturday night at the broadcast. It's funny because that was the second time in like 2 hours I had heard that. My wife actually said that while we were sitting there watching the match, when they brought up kind of the attendance records that Nebraska had been a part of. And, I think Nebraska fans get in their feels a little bit when they hear about Caitlin Clark in Iowa. But I think what it means is Nebraska is sort of playing the role of Caitlin Clark in this analogy, where this is a famous group of athletes. Everyone knows them as the team that put 92,000 people in a football stadium. They're the team that's in the Dick's Sporting Goods commercial.
Candace Parker,
exactly, with Candace Parker. Like, Nebraska is a name, and they draw eyeballs on TV and to arenas. And that's not just the Nebraska fans that show up in Oregon or Dallas to a match. Like, the other teams, marketing departments make it a big deal. Hey, Nebraska's coming to town, the Final Four team, and they put on special promotions and they get butts in seats. And so Nebraska definitely deserves a lot of credit as a program for drawing some of these big numbers.
Yeah, because you look at some of these schools on the list. I mean, SMU said they had 6,673. That was the first time they had ever charged admission for volleyball match in their school history. So, I mean, not only are people
Washington doubled ticket prices, I think.
Washington with
to get in.
General admission with $30. Usually it's 15. They're for any other non-Nebraska match, reserve seating is $20. I didn't see, because by the time I looked, reserve seating was sold out for Nebraska. So it was, and they even made Nebraska fans buy either season tickets or a minimum of 3 matches for that too. So other schools are taking aware of notice this. They're aware of what they can do, and they're lining their pockets, which good for them, I guess. But I'm sure John Cook in Nebraska would like a little cut of that. But I think John had a great line in his post-match interview that he said, I don't know if people are excited to come out to see us or maybe come out to see us lose. So
I mean, to use a pro wrestling term, like, Nebraska is the heel. They're the villain when they come to an opposing arena. And that's why heels drew money in pro wrestling, is the big crowd showed up to see them lose. And so, this is a role that Nebraska kind of has in the sport right now, is they wear the black hat. And when they show up on the road, other teams are going to show up to see, the white hat home team take them down a peg, although it didn't quite work out for Washington and Oregon this weekend.
Yeah. And sometimes it's also easier to get tickets on the road than it is to get a ticket to Devaney. I was looking at the Wisconsin match that's coming up in a couple of weeks too. I think the get-in price for that, was it $200 some, or it was more, it was 3 digits at least too, or Nebraska, Wisconsin football is playing the same day, and you can get a ticket for that for 30, 40, 50
Right.
bucks.
Well, we've both been to, Iowa City or Ames or Manhattan for these Nebraska matches, and there's tons of Nebraska fans there because it's way easier to get a ticket there than it is Devaney. So
and be sure this is
a program that's got a crazy following.
Yeah, this is also the first year Nebraska played at Washington and Oregon as part of a Big Ten regular season. So, I mean, some fans like to travel. I have my sister's in-laws families. They make a road trip every year. This year they went to Michigan State and Ohio State and saw some big crowds there too. So people travel. They make it part of it. They've been saving money by not having to go to bowl games. So now they go watch the volleyball team. So it's a lot more enjoyable than that.
And if I'm wrong on this, please tweet at us or send us an email. Let me know. I think this is the first time Nebraska played at Washington for a regular season. No, it wasn't for a regular season match. It was the 2014 regional. Nebraska went out and was an underdog and beat Washington in the Sweet 16 in 4. And then turn around and lost the regional final the next night. I think it was to BYU, if I'm remembering this correctly. But that was a big shocker. I remember from back in the day is Washington was heavily favored to win that Sweet 16 match, and Nebraska beat them in Seattle. And that was the last time, 10 years ago that Nebraska had played at Washington.
Yeah. The 2014 match was strange. We'll get to see them. I mean, there won't be any records this week when they play Washington or Minnesota and Indiana, but
that's another short turnaround though. They have to play. Like I imagine they flew home late Saturday night.
I think they flew home on Sunday morning. I think it would because they alluded that they were gone 9 days in a row out of 12. So I think they were staying because they didn't want to get a red eye flight. I mean, they would have got home at like 3 a.m. or something if they would have left after the match.
And then Minnesota is another Thursday night match in Lincoln. They play Thursday, Sunday this week.
Yeah.
So that was Nebraska's weekend. Let's move on to rotation 3, the rest of the weekend in the Big Ten. And it was the college volleyball kind of match of the weekend. It was the big NBC match on Saturday afternoon. It got the Paul Sunderland treatment. Number 7, Wisconsin boat raced. Number 3, Penn State. This was a dominant win for Wisconsin. The first set was a deuce game. It was tight, 25-23, but then Wisconsin wins game 2, 25-12, game 3, 25-13. Just listen to some of the numbers in this match. Wisconsin hit 479 against Penn State. Sarah Franklin and Anna Smrek, both with 13 kills. Wisconsin outblocked Penn State. We have it 11-0 here. Was it 11 or was it 19? It was some absurd number.
I'll look it up. You keep doing your
Wisconsin
rundown.
Shuts out Penn State blocking and reaches double digits themselves. Wisconsin only had 3 hitting errors the entire match. And then they got some nice contributions from Jenna Orzel as well, 11 kills and 7 digs and 5 blocks from her. Kelly Sheffield said after the match that their freshman who did not play that well against Nebraska the week prior, he thought, Charlie Fearbringer, their freshman setter, had 38 assists and 12 digs. He said it was her best match. And then Lola Schumacher, their freshman libero, who Nebraska, I think, picked on a little bit, really steadied and had a great match on Saturday against Penn State. Wisconsin, this is what, we have seen Wisconsin drop some bad matches this year. They lost to Minnesota. They got, swept by Nebraska the week before. Wisconsin is still showing that their best day might be better than any other team's best days. When they're clicking and they can get Franklin and Smrek and Devin Robinson and, Carter Booth, like all of those 6'6" ladies firing on all cylinders and their setters having a good day, they can beat anyone. And they made Penn State look bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And Paul Sunderland did a great job too of giving Nebraska their props. Like this was a Wisconsin team that hit under 100 a week ago and not much time to change or really work on things. Same lineup, same roster, and they completely shut down. They did finish with 11 total blocks, 3 solos, 16 block assists. So that's 19, but divide by 2 for the block assist, 11 total blocks.
11. Yep. I must be pulling that 19 from somewhere else.
3 plus 16 block assists. You forgot to divide by 2.
Somebody probably didn't realize that when they were tweeting out the stats earlier, and I probably stole it from Twitter. So that's a lesson from you folks, like trust but verify. Cameron Hanna had 10 kills for Penn State. Jess Mrzik had a rough night, 9 kills on 40 swings. Penn State hit just 117, and this is a team that was hitting right around 300 on the season. No more than 5 kills really from anyone else. So, Wisconsin, I kind of feel bad for NBC. They've been getting all these clunkers. Yeah. When they're trying to showcase the sport on Saturday afternoons, it's like, well, that's a sweep. That's a sweep.
Yeah. And they're not supposed to be. Their build is a good match. I mean, Wisconsin versus Purdue was 2 top 12 teams and top 10 teams at that time, and Wisconsin sweeps them. And then Nebraska versus Ohio State, that's a slight match. That one you kind of expect to be a sweep, but then again, 2 top 7 teams you expect to be competitive, and Wisconsin's not doing much for helping ratings. They're prepared to have some extra programming to fill in for the quick nature of these matches.
There's been some clues though that Penn State maybe was ripe for a letdown. Because they dropped a set to Northwestern. I think they dropped a set to Iowa over the last couple of weeks, and it's like, yeah, you won, but you shouldn't be. If you're a top 5 team in the country, you should not be dropping sets to Northwestern and Iowa.
Yeah, that's the last 2. They dropped one to SC. They went 5 with UCLA. Went 5 at Ohio State.
5 at Ohio State.
Dropped one to Indiana. So they dropped one to Maryland too. So they're a very good team. Don't get me wrong with that, but they've been messing with fire, and finally they went up against a team who doesn't let you mess around at all too, and they completely woodshedded Penn State too. So that was not the only ranked versus ranked. There's a couple other ones too. I mean, we mentioned this. We've hit this the rough week that Minnesota had. Oregon went out there, and after they played Nebraska, they rebounded quite nicely. Swept Minnesota 14, 20, 21 in Minneapolis too. So this was the hard week that Washington and Oregon both had to. They hosted Nebraska at home in the Northwest, but then both had to travel to Minnesota to play the Gophers. So that's the one split weekend they have. That travel wasn't their friend, but they made quick bigness. Ofegbu hit 714 with 10 kills. I think she was 10 kills on 12 swings is roughly what that equates out to be. And then 7 blocks. Mimi Collier had a solid night, 10 kills. And then Oregon hit 327. And again, their block did damage against Minnesota 13-3.
So I meant to say this when we were breaking down Nebraska and Oregon. Oregon has some really good players, really good players. That's a team that I feel like their record maybe should be a little bit better than it is, because Mimi Collier is outstanding. That middle of Fuegbu is awesome, a great athlete. And then Michelle Owabete, I thought was really good outside hitter as well. Oregon's got some stud athletes, and for whatever reason, they've dropped a couple matches. I guess if they have a first year setter who isn't fully healthy, and I don't know what their back row looked pretty good to me. That they have a transfer libero from Kansas State, Mackenzie Morris, who fits into our every libero is good now theory. Yep. And Oregon's gonna get stuck in someone's regional in the tournament, and that team's gonna be mad. Because Oregon's pretty good, and you just hope they, maybe they don't end up getting set to Lincoln. But
they had more problems. Had more problems too, because they had another injury. I guess Washington has more injured than them, but they suffered a kind of a scary moment. Sofia Gregoria had an injury. She landed on a teammate and coming down from an attack, had to be helped off, and she had a great night. She had 7 kills on 8 swings up to that point and 2 blocks. So we'll see how she rebounds. I mean, it didn't look good. Anytime you land on your teammate's foot and fall down, you could hear the scream on the broadcast too that she was in a lot of pain.
That's what happened to Lindsey Krause last year, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it how she got injured?
In practice, hers was in practice, so we didn't get a lot of film of that too. But you twist your ankle, that can do some damage to the ligaments there too.
The one bright spot for Minnesota in that Oregon loss, Julia Hansen, who we're going to talk about breaking down Minnesota in a little bit, had a really good night, 18 kills and hit 318, but 3 other Gophers hit negative and, combined for 7 kills, 13 errors. So not a lot of help. Minnesota might be one of those teams where, if you're going to let one person go off, but as long as 3 people don't go off, you're going to be okay. Minnesota has some good pieces, and we'll talk about them again in a few minutes, but They go down to Oregon earlier this week. Also, Washington took down Minnesota up in Minneapolis in 4, 25-21, 25-23, 14-25, 25-22. Imani Bush, who had to get moved over from opposite to left side when Nebraska played them, had a big night against Minnesota. 19 kills, 13 digs. She's just a freshman. She was one of the higher rated recruits in the country this year, if my memory serves correctly, and she's going to be real, real good. The eye-popping stat line of this match, Washington had 13 aces against Minnesota. They had 1 against Nebraska, but they, you could see some of those serves they sent Nebraska's way were tough, like hard driving, moving serves, and they got Minnesota 13 times from the service line.
Yeah, the downdraft wasn't blowing in Seattle with it, but it was in the barn, and
they must have had like the heaters on up in the Maturi Pavilion.
Yeah, the final stats were kind of skewed because Minnesota did win that third set 25-14 in a blowout. Well, the other 3 sets were fairly close. So, I mean, Minnesota did hit better. They hit 248 to just 123 for Washington.
They doubled up their hitting percentage and lost in 4.
Yeah. So that's a weird part. You get that one blowout set can completely distort what the final stats look like. But Minnesota missed on 11 serves, and then the 3 close sets, just Washington won those, made a couple, not one deuce, and then both teams got to 20 in the other 2 sets that Washington pulled out. So rough week for the Gophers. But I mean, so we're done with 7 weeks. I don't think we mentioned this too, but Nebraska is now alone in first place in the Big Ten. They're 14-0. Penn State's 1 game back. Wisconsin is in third place all by itself at 12-2. Purdue's in 4th place, 11-3. Then you got Oregon, and then you got Illinois and Minnesota both tied at 9-5. And then you got a whole slew of, USC, Washington all have 8 wins. So
it looks more and more like the Big Ten title race is going to come down to that 6-day period, the week of Thanksgiving, where Nebraska hosts Wisconsin on November 23rd, and then goes to Penn State on Friday, November 29th. We might not know the Big Ten champ until that final weekend.
Yeah. And that's why I think the Big Ten set up the schedule for that too. So maximum of excitement late, and we'll see. I mean, you got to favor what Nebraska is going to do this week with at home, and I think they have Iowa in there as well mixed up.
And they got to go to Maryland as well. But, don't overlook Minnesota. Minnesota is a team on Thursday night that can, if they play their best game, they can be right there with you. Let's move on to rotation 4. We got a great guest this week. We love Kayla. It's been a while since I've been able to talk with her, but Kayla Banwarth was a former, Nebraska All-American libero, won a national championship with the Huskers, was on Team USA. And was former Nebraska assistant coach as well. She is going to be starting her first year this year as the head coach of the Atlanta Vibe. We talk with Kayla about a lot of things, moving into professional coaching, being the one that discovered Lexi Rodriguez in a camp and sort of what she saw from Lexi. And then also, just everyone seems like they've got good floor defenders now. And how has the level of floor defense kind of grown over the last 10 years? So we're going to move into rotation 4 with a great chat with former Husker great Kayla Banwarth.
And we move on to our next rotation. We are joined by former Nebraska player and assistant, 2016 Olympic bronze medalist, and now the head coach of the Atlanta Vibe, Kayla Banworth, joining us on the podcast. Kayla, thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Your name's been brought up a lot in the last week too, so we thought it'd be a great opportunity to talk to you. Lexi Rodriguez, we're talking to you on Wednesday. That she's entering this week, tied with you for number 2 on Nebraska's all-time dig list at 1,706. We're assuming tomorrow night, Thursday, when they play Oregon, Lexi will record a dig. Will pass. I hope
someone will probably hit a ball her direction.
Yeah, unless Armageddon happens, then it's gonna happen.
So yeah,
don't jinx it.
Yeah.
I mean, and we got a chance to talk to her this week too, and she said she kind of gave the line that she may not have been a Nebraska Cornhusker if it weren't for you. So can you take us back to those early days? I think when you first saw Lexi playing club volleyball, or what do you remember about baby Lexi when you were watching her?
Oh, baby Lexi. She was even more adorable than she is now. But no, I was thinking about it today actually, and I think Lexi was my first ever commit as a recruiter, which was like amazing. And such a special player. I mean, I watched her as like an 8th grader, and you can just tell right away that she knew the game. She was a step ahead of everybody. She could cover a lot of court. She was smooth, athletic. I mean, just everything about her game right away. I was like, yes, we got to get this girl. She's a stud. She's going to be, she's going to be a stud for a long time. And, we had her out to Dream Team camp that first summer. And, back before some of the rule changes, we were allowed to sit down with her post camp and give her the offer. And I think her mom might've been there, but, we're talking, we give her the offer, kind of wrap up the conversation with, hey, take some time, think about it. We'll talk soon. And this girl made it to the elevator before she about faced, came back in and committed. And I was so excited because, I mean, I've always been a fan. So to have her join the squad and as my first commit, man, it was a moment I definitely will never forget.
Yeah. I imagine you feel a little bit vindicated in your recruiting. She's your first commit to have her go on and be one of the all-time greats in Nebraska. You got to feel a little proud of yourself for your recruiting chops then.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It would have been pretty embarrassing had I been wrong, probably. But I'm more. It's not so much that I'm like proud of me. I'm proud of her because you build these relationships with these recruits and they become a part of your journey and a part of your career and you want to see them succeed and no better kid than Lexi, right? She's just the sweetest girl and her family is amazing. So I'm more happy that she's having the success she is.
Kayla, what initially jumped out to you about her as a player, and then how have you sort of seen her develop in the times you've been able to see her play recently?
Yeah, I think the one thing that stood out to me right away was just the fact that she just seemed like she was a step ahead of the game, right? She saw things a little bit quicker than the people next to her. She commanded the court in that way because she saw the game really well. So that might have been the thing that stood out to me the most. And then the next thing would be, she in club, even as an 8th grader, she took up so much court and serve receive, which as a libero obviously is important. You got to take some stress off your outside hitters who are trying to pass and hit. So for her to have those two abilities right away was, really stood out to me. And she's just capitalizing on those skills, right? John Cook is one of the best trainers in the country when it comes to training technique and training skill. So to take those kind of raw talents, she was trained well at sports performance, but to take that and continue to build under John Cook's training regimen, has allowed her to grow in this really stable way in terms of serve receive. I mean, she's the rock in serve receive. And then you could just tell in terms of her poise and her leadership. And I know the girls love her as a leader and the way she communicates, she commands the court. She truly is the quarterback back there. So to see her kind of blossom into that role has been really neat.
Yeah. Cool. And she's become part of a legacy at Nebraska. I mean, the libero position has quite the illustrious history, all the way back to Lindsay Wishmeyer, now Peterson playing in it. Danny Busman Kelly was at it. You played it for a couple of years. I mean, Justine Wong-Arantes. I mean, you went on to play the Olympics. Justine did too. Kenzie Maloney, Kenzie Knuckles. I mean, is there sort of a pride that comes with being a libero at Nebraska, to wearing that jersey and being part of that club?
Yeah, I mean, even just hearing you read off those list of names, it's insane to hear my name amongst those liberos. What an amazing group. So yeah, I think I would assume that all of us in that list, wear that as a badge of honor, and to have been a libero at Nebraska is no small thing. So to have experienced that and to be a part of that group is, man, what an honor just to have my name read amongst those other amazing athletes.
We were talking on our show last week about just the level of play of floor defenders, whether it's DSs, liberos, in the college game, really seems to be elevated. Like, it is really hard to put a ball down unless you are hitting a crazy angle, and people are not shanking balls that come their way like you might have seen even 10 years ago. As you've been a part of the college game the last few years and what you're seeing, does it seem to you like that's the case as well, and what's leading to that? Or are we just running into a really elite class of liberos or defenders this year.
No, I totally agree. And I think it's the way the game is evolving, right? I watch the matches sometimes these days and I'm like, man, it's just like, this just seems so much better, like such like high level volleyball, more so than when I was in college, right? You go back to look at, the old super fuzzy, YouTube videos of me playing in college. I'm like, wow, it's a totally different game. So I think it's part of the way the game's evolving. And then, yeah, I mean, there's just so many elite liberos out there that can make these spectacular plays and make it look easy almost sometimes, that it is amazing watching them. So I think that's a couple of factors. I think it's a tribute to this kind of era of liberos, is just they're really great liberos. And then the fact of the matter that the game it's evolving, it's getting more high level. It's obviously going to continue to evolve and get more difficult. So, it's an adapt or die type of situation for a lot of these liberos.
Yeah. Who are some of those liberos you like watching? Who are in the college game or professional game? Who are the liberos that you enjoy seeing out there perform their craft?
Man, I mean, there's a lot of good liberos. You guys know I love Lexi. Elena Scott at Louisville is doing some really nice things.
Mm-hmm.
Elena Ogilvie at Stanford is doing really nice things. Kate Georgiadis. I mean, there's a lot of really elite NCAA liberos. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Cami Neeson, who I recruited to Ole Miss. I'm a huge fan of hers. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, I mean, international, there's a ton. Obviously, Eric Shoji is a staple, and I was fortunate to be able to be in the USA gym with him for a little bit and really enjoy his game. But I mean, any Japanese libero, man, I could watch the Japanese liberos play all day, every day. And the list goes on and on. So we're fortunate to be in an era of like really spectacular liberos kind of at every turn that, it's been a joy to watch those athletes.
Well, and we don't want to get you in trouble with your own roster. You're coaching a pretty good libero down with the Atlanta Vibe right now. Morgan Hens, who was a stud at Stanford, was one of the best liberos I ever saw playing in the college game. It's probably a nice situation to walk into, to be able to have your backcourt handled by someone like that.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited. I got to work with Morgan a little bit last year at Athletes Unlimited, and I'm talking about watching these Japanese defenders play, but I mean, Morgan's got to have some Japanese heritage in her somewhere, because she is just, amazing to watch. So, yeah, I'm so excited to work with her. They obviously had a really successful season last year, but didn't quite finish things the way that they wanted to. So, Morgan's back, and she's back with a vengeance, and I'm really, really excited to coach her.
Yeah.
Well, what else is kind of exciting to you about the situation you're walking into with the Atlanta Vibe? They had a great season last year. This is going to be your first year as the head coach with them. Just what attracted you to the situation, and what fires you up about getting this opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think, this professional women's volleyball in the United States is obviously in its youth. And something that a lot of people are really wanting to be able to stick around for a while. And man, I would have given my left arm to be able to play in the States when I was playing, still. So to be able to help grow this in some sort of way or another was really appealing to me. And then I was, I watched the PBF last year. I was really impressed with that team, that group of athletes. So to be a part of that was really appealing to me. And then I felt a really good, strong connection with this team's owner, this team's president. And I feel really good about their mission and the goals for the team this season. So there was a lot of those types of factors that added up to make this job kind of a yes for me. But yeah, trying to win that championship this year and continue to help grow professional women's volleyball in the country is our two big ones for me.
Yeah, and you're going to make your coaching debut. I think the first match the Vibe play is in Omaha too. So are you looking forward to that when the schedules came out? Was that one you circled immediately? Like that's going to be a fun one.
It's going to be so fun. I'm so excited. We play home and away against everybody twice, so I'll get to be able to go to Omaha twice. And yeah, I think we even finish with Omaha at home, mm-hmm. which is really kind of a cool bookend for me. But I always love going to Nebraska. Anytime I can get back to Nebraska in any sort of capacity is really fun for me. And if it's volleyball related in some way, then that just sweetens the pot a little bit. I mean, you guys know this. Everybody knows this. The Nebraska volleyball community is just so, so special. So to be able to come home to that any chance I get is going to be awesome.
For For sure. You were, I mean, you mentioned before that you kind of worked with Athletes Unlimited last year and their hybrid coach advisor role. And you're going and getting started with this too. I mean, in your experience, I mean, how is being a professional coach different than being in a college world? I mean, obviously you're not recruiting high school or prep athletes, but what is different about your day-to-day, the structure of your practices or kind of your interactions with your players? What's different being a professional coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a few differences and there's a few similarities. With Athletes Unlimited, it's a very unique role because you're not even considered a coach, right? You're considered a facilitator. And it's very much an athlete-driven league. So you give them like all the autonomy. I'm here to just kind of help steer the ship a little bit, but I'm going to be in the background, kind of let you do your thing. And there is a little bit of that to me so far with PBF, where it's like, you guys are, you're adults, you're professionals. You should know the way this works. You should know the way, what your body needs. You should know how to be professional here. You should be able to take complete ownership of your season, your body, your journey, and like you should be in command over that. So there's a little bit more responsibility on their shoulders to, act in a professional way. It's a little bit more job-like. Whereas obviously, student athletes these days, it's not quite on that level yet, although it might be heading that way. But they're younger. They have things to learn. They have lessons to learn. They have growth. They're growing into the women that they want to be. Whereas there's a little bit less of that on the professional side, and a little bit more, autonomy, a little bit more ownership over your own development, your own season.
We're talking with former Husker great Kayla Banwarth, the new head coach of the Atlanta Vibe, whose second season in the Pro Volleyball Federation is going to start in January. And Kayla, to follow up on that just a second, that you mentioned that the professional volleyball in the U.S. is kind of still in its infancy. And the coaches who are working in Love and the PVF, not all of them had professional coaching experience. A lot of them had college experience. And then even going farther back, you have people with high school and club experience. Is it an adjustment at all, a difficult one to make, to going into, working with younger athletes, to working with athletes that are much closer to peers to you when you put on the whistle and now you're coaching a professional team?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll probably be able to answer it a little bit better come December once we get into practices. But so far, it's been pretty refreshing to be able to relate to the athletes a little bit more, the journey that they're on, I've been on, which is the same for collegiate athletes. But, every time my birthday rolls around, I'm like, oh man, I'm getting a little bit older, a little bit less, a little bit more distance in age from me to the collegiate athletes. So it's not quite the same as when I started coaching collegiately and I was a little bit younger and I could really relate to them a little bit more. That gap is getting a little bit wider every year, obviously. So to be on the same level in more of a peer type of way is great, because I think that's going to help me build a trust with them. It's going to help me build a rapport with them and, kind of build that strength between player and coach.
Great. Well, and we mentioned earlier too that Kayla was part of the 2016 U.S. Olympic team. You're part of the national team program for several years. We've talked over the last couple of weeks that the U.S. women's national team is now between coaches, with the announcement that Karch Karai is going to go over and coach the USA men's team. Were you I forget, were you under Hugh McCutcheon? Was he the coach then, or did you play under Karch too?
Yeah, I started my first 2 years. Hugh was the head coach and Karch was an assistant.
Okay.
And then, my full quad, Karch was the head coach, obviously.
Well, as someone who's been in that program, then just want to get your opinion on what are the biggest attributes that you would look for in a coach of the U.S. women's national team. If you had any sort of influence over the decision makers, you want to say, hey, you really want to prioritize someone who does this, this, and this, or has these qualities.
Man, wow, what a question. It's so funny because, the second that was announced, I'm sure everyone came up with like 5 names in their head immediately, right? I did the same. I won't say those today, but
you wildly speculated on those as well.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. We just
okay, cool. So, but one of the things I think Karch did just phenomenally was he had relationships with every single athlete that came into his gym, and it wasn't fake, right? It meant a lot to him. So I think that's one thing that he did really well, was he was able to connect with all of his players. So obviously a coach that kind of has that same capability. I know John Spross the same he was the same with his guys. He just had a really great connection with all of them. But then obviously it's like the game is going to continue to evolve. The game is growing. Like, can we get a coach in here that is going to help that? Right. What are, who are some of the best coaches in the world? I mean, there's names in your head that like, yes, okay, he is in the conversation as one of the best coaches in the world right now. Or yes, she is someone who should absolutely be considered. She's one of the best coaches out there right now. So there's got to be a balance between like, I'm a really high level IQ coach. I'm a really high level volleyball coach, and I understand the game in a way that not many people do. But at the same time, is someone who can build those relationships, strengthen that bond, continue to build on that culture that is so important to USA volleyball.
Okay. Well, we are wrapping up with Kayla Banworth. I want to go back to the libero discussion too. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed, maybe more so as well, maybe not, but it seems like a lot of the time, some of the liberos or DSs in college are converted from different positions in high school, whether they played setter or outside hitter, maybe an undersized outside hitter, and it seems like that their coaches getting away from that. Is that just the development of the liberos? I mean, is that a sign of development of better training in the youth program too? Or is that just because, I mean, you were a former setter as well, an outside hitter in high school before you became a DS in college. Is that a good sign of the progress? And kind of go back to our discussion of the elite level of libero play. Is that just they're getting longer training on how to be a back row player full time?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously Danny was a setter. I was a hitter and set a little bit. Justine was a setter. It might just be because the libero position is getting older, right? And that's, those things maybe happen when the libero position was a little bit younger. So, these youth programs have had time to, like, there's an established libero and they know how to train liberos now. So that could be a factor. I think another factor could be, the participation. There's this push for like participation and, let's have 50 million subs and let's get everybody playing time. And, so there's these players who aren't necessarily tall enough or good enough to be setters or hitters. Now they're like specializing in this one thing, right? You don't see a 12-year-old team anymore where like everybody plays every position. That's not happening, which I think is unfortunate, but that's a whole separate discussion. But you have players that are getting more into like, I'm 11 and like I'm a libero already, and I know that, and I'm sitting here like, okay, like no, go set or go hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that specialization, it's not necessarily a bad thing for liberos, because I think yes, like there's true liberos coming out of high school that are just true liberos, and that's what they should be. But the whole separate discussion is we're specializing positions when they're like 10 or 11 or 12, which is like, let's not do that anymore.
Yeah.
All right. We've been here with Kayla Banwarth on Volleyball State. Kayla, thank you so much for being with us today, and good luck in your first season in Atlanta. And we're excited to see you when you come back with Nebraska in January.
All right. Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Kayla. And thanks to Kayla Banworth for joining us again. Always great to hear from her. Let's move now to Rotation 5, do a national roundup. Not a lot of upsets, but there were a couple key matches that had some impact on conference races. We'll start at the top. Pitt, number 1. Very little drama this week. They swept North Carolina and Duke. They made their way through the North Carolina State. They hit 434 and 350. They've won 8 straight. A little bit tougher competition this week as they host kind of Florida State. They're at the fringe of the rankings. Miami, who owns an upset over Texas this year.
And Stanford.
Yeah. They got that coming up. But I think, again, much like the Big Ten race we just talked about, it'll come down to that last week when they play at Louisville on November 27th. So Pitt taking care of business, same cast of characters, same level of excellence. There's a lot of debate. I've been getting some heat last week. I still had Pitt number 1 over Nebraska, but Pitt is just they're so efficient. They're so good.
Yeah, they're an efficiency machine, right? 434 against North Carolina, hitting 350 against Duke. Like, I know Nebraska had a big hitting mark against Washington, but like Pitt just has the weapons. And I know that I'm not saying that, Pitt would be guaranteed to beat Nebraska if they played on a neutral floor, but like Pitt does not have very many weaknesses. And some of this is magnified, I think, by the conference they play in. They're playing mid-tier teams that would be considered mid-tier in the Big Ten probably each week. But like you can only play the teams that the schedule puts in front of you, and they're so good. So, I don't take issue at all with having Pitt ranked number one in the rankings.
Yeah, if they drop a set, then we'll kind of raise some eyebrows, but they're taking care of business.
Yeah. Also, number 6 Stanford bounced back from a tough week and had no problems with number 16 Georgia Tech. Longtime conference rivals. Heck of an engineering duel between Stanford and Georgia Tech. Stanford wins at 25-9, 25-17, 25-12 in Palo Alto. Elliot Rubin, 11 kills, hit .435. E. Park Hurt had 10 kills on 12 swings, which math tells me is pretty good. Old friend Sammy Francis, 9 kills, 7 blocks. Georgia Tech hit just .034 for the match, and Bianca Bertolino had 7 kills for the Ramblin' Wreck. So Stanford, a big win there. And then the match, Lincoln, sorry, go ahead. You have something?
The great match. The match, I think, maybe the match of the weekend, too, the Big East match. Creighton and Marquette, they played once this year, October 1st. Creighton won that one in 4.
In Omaha.
Really? Yeah, and in Omaha, this one I was in Milwaukee, and they're the top 2 teams. Creighton, that's the only loss that Marquette has in league. Creighton's undefeated. Creighton dropped the first set that they've lost since they last played Marquette. They'd won 31 in a row. Marquette wins the first one, but then Creighton regroups, bounce back, take care of business. They have ended up winning in 4. So they're still undefeated in Big East play, and they're now in the driver's seat. They only got a week or 2 left of that, so they're in the drive. They're probably going to win the Big East. This is what Creighton needs to do. They could move in the top 4 of the rankings this week with now that Penn State's lost. So Northis 23 kills, Ava Martin 16 kills, both hit above 400. Creighton hit 356 as a team, excuse me. So,
well, this is how dominant Creighton was after they dropped game 1, 25-21. They won the next 3, 12, 18, and 13.
Yeah.
They hit 356, and let's see, Marquette hit not that great, 146. So Creighton finishes 210 points higher. I don't know what happened in game 1. I think I didn't get to see it. I did tune in starting in game 2. And Creighton hit 700 in game 2. They were through messing around. So this Creighton team is a machine in the Big East. I was looking at their schedule right before we started taping. They don't really have a marquee opponent left. They're going to say they drop one match, right? Like, let's be charitable and say they drop a match in the Big East. They're going to go into the postseason at 27-3. This is a Creighton team, again, one more bounce away. Say Penn State loses, say Wisconsin loses another match. Creighton could grab one of those top 4 seeds, and they're going to be they're going to be a 2 seed at worst. Yeah. And they're going to annoy the crap out of some number 1 seed when Creighton gets sent to their regional, if that's what ends up happening. So Kirsten Bernthal Booth has them rolling.
Yeah, I wonder, we haven't talked about this, but Creighton has Seton Hall, Georgetown, DePaul, and Xavier left in the regular season. The Big East does have a tournament. I think we've mentioned this before, but you hope that for Creighton's sake, they're hoping that they play Marquette one more time, because that's really the only match that's going to boost their resume at all if they get to play Marquette and beating teams 3 times. I wonder if they do get to host, would they? I bet you would they move the regional to the CHI Health Center? Because I feel like is Sokol. Would they play a regional in that? I don't know.
Well, do they have would the building be available? I don't know what Creighton's basketball schedule is like, but maybe they bid it there. I don't know. Otherwise, they have a really good home court advantage in Sokol Arena. The match of the week in the Big 12 conference, Arizona State takes control of the Big 12 race. They beat Kansas 3-1 on Wednesday night in Tempe. Arizona State's now won 12 straight matches. Shania Cromartie had 15 kills. So did Jelly Sear. This was a really close match in that 2 of these sets were deuce games. I think one was 27-25, another was 25-23. Aya El Nady had 21 kills for Kansas. And then Kansas, did not have a great weekend.
Nope.
In the desert. They turned around and lost at Arizona later on this week, Mary Schroll, who's that excellent libero for Arizona State in the KU match, had 21 digs. We mentioned her, I think, in our talk with Kayla Banwarth as well. But Arizona State also took down K-State on this weekend. So Arizona State now is the team to beat in the Big 12 Conference, and themselves are looking for a pretty high seed coming up next month in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Big shout out. Kansas also lost to Arizona they lost in the fifth set 15-13. They tried to make a furious comeback, comes up short. Jordan Wilson of Arizona put up 37 kills and hit 465. So
wow.
Arizona hit 347 for the match. You mentioned El Nadi kind of led them as well, 28 kills. Caroline Bean had 16 kills and 22 digs. So good performances, but just, Kansas was there, came into this week undefeated.
In the Big 12.
Yeah, in the Big 12. They only lost, Creighton was their only loss non-conference. So they were sitting pretty in the Big 12, but then you go to Arizona where dreams go to die, and they
dreams and old people.
In second place.
Man, what a week for Kansas's IL Nady, 49 kills, but lost both matches. So, they've got some great players down at KU. They're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the tournament as well. So let's move into rotation 6. Nebraska, 2 more matches. They come back home. They finally get to play at the Devaney Center again. Play Minnesota at 8 p.m. on Thursday, and then Indiana Saturday at 7:30. Both those matches, I believe, are on Big Ten Network. We're going to start with Minnesota, who is 16-8 overall, 9-5 in the Big Ten, but is coming off a week where they lost at home both matches to Oregon and Washington this week. They were outblocked by Oregon 14.5-3 and out hit by Oregon 327-127. So I think I read a recap of that match where Keegan Cook was kind of flustered. He's like, it's too late in the season for us to be playing like this. We've got to lock in now, and they've got the players to do it. Julia Hansen, who we mentioned, had a good match against Oregon and Washington. She's kind of emerged as their top attacker. She's been on the team for a couple years, but this is her breakout year, their junior outside hitter. She's had double-digit kills in their last 7 matches. She averages 3.7 kills a set, which is top 10 in the Big Ten. So Julia Hansen is the player to watch for Minnesota. We've got an opposite hitter, Lydia Grote, who's pretty good, and then McKenna Wooker, who I feel like has been at Minnesota for a while. Are there other top hitters? The player for Minnesota who's been there like for a long time. We joke about these players like Illinois' outside hitter Raina Terry, who's been in school for 8 years. Melanie Schaffmaster has been in Minnesota for 6 years. She's still their setter. She is like I read something in her bio this week where she's the only player in Minnesota history to have like 4,000 assists, 300 kills, 300 digs, 200 blocks. She's a really good player who's had an injury history throughout her career. She's also one of the most offensive-minded setters in the Big Ten. She's going to attack a lot. She's going to dump a lot. It's another thing for Nebraska's block and floor defense to worry about. But Minnesota, not a bad team, just a team who has to play this meat grinder of a Big Ten schedule and takes their bumps and bruises there too.
Yeah, I remember watching Julia Hansen last year. I went up to Minnesota, and she kind of plays. McKenna Wooker had some issues last year too, and she came in and she just played a brief bit. She's very impressive, I thought, when I got to see her last year. So she's legit, and I think Lydia Grote's kind of had some up and downs this year, but Minnesota's good. But Nebraska will then take on Indiana on Saturday. Indiana is currently playing USC right now. They're in the 4th set. I just looked at it a minute or two ago, and it's tied 24-24. So maybe by the end of this blurb, we'll have a result for that match. But they're in the bottom half of the league in most categories. They've been kind of in that soft middle of the Big Ten conference. They made a big jump last year under Steve Aird as their head coach, and then they haven't really followed that up this year at all. Most of their attacks come from Canela Alonso Corcelis, who's a junior outside hitter from Spain. She had 23 kills against Rutgers last week. She averages 3.6 kills per set. Junior opposite Avery Tatum. She also has the ability to go off. And really just as 20 kills against, she had 20 kills. She's averaging 3.5. but I think their real strength is their setter. Who I'm blanking
Cameron
on.
Hayward.
Yeah, Cameron Hayward, one of the better setters in the country. I think she was all league last year, and really as aggressive at the net. She attacks very well. Also, one of the best servers in the country.
She's a lefty, right?
Yeah, she's a jump serve, and she just sends a bullet across the net. So it made it really hard to. So she looks fun to watch, exciting to watch, but Indiana just kind of isn't terminating at a very high rate and struggles at times as well too. So
yeah, Indiana's 12-11 coming into Sunday's match against USC. They're under 500 in the Big Ten. They're 5-8, and they have the 5th worst. They're not great defensively. They have the 5th worst opponent hitting percentage in the Big Ten. So if Nebraska's looking for a night that maybe they can go off offensively, maybe they can put up a decent number against Indiana. But kind of like you mentioned, Lincoln, the key to Indiana, almost like all of their swings come from Candela Alonso Corcels. I think she has like 800 swings on the year, and Tatum might have in the upper 500s, and no one else has a whole ton.
Yeah, I mean, they're a good serving team too. I mean, Hayworth is good. Alonso Castellanos is good. Maddie Saris is, she's had some time. She's one of those inconsistent players that they really can't get a lot to. But they also have some fun stories too. They had a transfer from USC who played indoor, Delaney Maple, who won a couple of national titles with the USC beach team, but decided to use her last year of eligibility to come play indoor. She's kind of a defensive specialist. And then they also had a transfer. I forget what her name is, but she was going. She played undergrad up in Toronto, and then was going to go to grad school down in Indiana to get her medical degree. And she's going to medical school, law school. Sorry, she's going to law school. It's like, I got your eligibility. Why can't I play? So, and also late breaking news: Indiana has lost to USC in 4 sets.
So they are now 12-12 overall, and 5-9. In the Big Ten Conference. USC lost their first match of the weekend, I believe, too. So the women of Troy get a split this week. But that is the show this week. Come back next week where we will have recaps of Nebraska's matches against Minnesota and Indiana as the Huskers try to stretch their winning streak to 23 matches. Subscribe and review our show. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? You made it this far. Go ahead and subscribe. Give us a 5-star review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. Also, if you want to check out some merch, we've got some great stuff. Your Bald Set Spike shirts, your Justice for Libero stuff, and then your plain old Volleyball State merch as well. You can find all of that online at hurrdatsports.com/shop. You can also hit us up on social media. You can find us on Twitter at VolleyballPod. And Lincoln, where else can everyone find all the stuff that they need to do?
Yeah, send us an email at volleyballstate@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter at Lincoln_VB. If Threads is your jam, Lincoln_VB. So thanks to Kahm Broham for producing today's show. Thanks to Hurrdat Sports. Follow them on social media and YouTube. You can look at our lovely smiling faces and enjoy more content there. So thank you for living in the Volleyball State.